Okay, Rabotai, tonight is, by the way, Shir number 29 since we started. Since we started Hilchot Shabbat, we're up to 29 shirim in already. We are in volume 19. The books that are in front of you. We're on page. We're on page 96. No, wait. I mean, I lied. My mistake. 92. We're on page 92. What I'd like to do tonight is to review what we did last week as a little of a review, because we're really continuing in the inyan of Tochein. Okay, so in the back of each shir, they have a beautiful review. So if you want to turn with me to page 102, turn with me to the book, page 102. 102 is just a few pages later, not all the way in the back. Yeah. Okay, turn to page, one more page. Okay. Yeah, turn to page 102. We're going to review what we learned last week. They have a beautiful review of every section that we learned. This way it will give us a better idea of what we're holding at right now. Okay, so let's take a look. First, we had to define what the malacha of Tochein is. So Tochein is what we understand it as grinding or grounding. It's like you take wheat and you make it into a flour. Right? The Menuchat HaHavaz said what it is, take a look at number one. The malacha of Tochein consists of breaking a singular entity into many very small entities, whether by grinding, chopping, shaving, for the purpose of using the small product. So Tochein is taking a big product, a big entity, and cutting it down to size either way of grinding it, pulverizing, smashing it, whatever it is, to make it into smaller entities. That is the malacha of Tochein. Okay? Then we brought a Gemara in number 2. And number 2 on page 102, we brought a Gemara Masechet Shabbat. And Rav Papa said that Tochein is an issue when you cut, according to Rashi, when you cut silka. Silka, we said, most people translate it as beets. Chamavaji translates silka as spinach. Okay, so the person is cutting beets / spinach. There, the Gemara says he could be chayiv on the malacha of Tochein. All right, Rav Menashe says a person who chops wood for sawdust also could be over the malacha of Tochein. Now, it says over there harim silka. Okay, Rashi understood that as being cutting. Okay, the Rambam also understood that as cutting. However, the Rabbeinu Hananel and the Rosh understood that Tochein is never cutting. It's pulverizing. It's when you take wheat and you ground the wheat, you're not cutting the wheat. You can't cut wheat to make flour. You have to grind it. That is Tochein. That's the Rabbeinu Hananel, and that's the Rosh. So you have a machloket, Rashi, Rambam, versus Rabbeinu Hananel and the Rosh. Is cutting very small also considered Tochein or not? The Shulchan Aruch goes with the Rambam, as he usually does. And he says that cutting cutting it very finely, is an issue of Tochein. Okay? So that's the halacha l'maisa, that cutting very small is an issue of Tochein, and you can't do it on Shabbat. We're going to see how it could be done. Right now, at this point, cutting very small is an issue of Tochein. The Bir Halacha says we don't know what's very small, what's dak. Therefore, anything that's smaller than usual will probably be a problem. All right. So that's number 4. Now we're up to the next section, which says which fruits and vegetables are subject to Tochein. Right. We're doing the review. We're on page 102. So Tosfot writes that when it comes to food, the only item that is subject to Tochein is what the Gemara said, which was silka. Okay? Which, depending how you define silka, beets or spinach, Tosfot said, the Gemara has said one item, and that was our question. How come Tosfot is being so picky? Usually, Gemara brings an example, right? But here, that's what he said. It says silka, it's silka only. That's the only thing of food that can be subject to Tochein. The Rambam says, so the Rambam in number 2, right in the bottom, 102, the second number 2 on the page, the Rambam says that Tochein applies to beets until all other produce waiting to be cooked. Okay?
My question is,
Yeah.
the better, I mean, we are doing a lot of loving according to whatever they did in Bet HaMikdash.
Right. So
Now,
what was Tochein at the Mikdash?
Bet HaMikdash was about wheat, right?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily
was
because
not silka for sure.
no. So Tochein in the Mikdash, when we say the 39 malachot are based on what they did in the Mikdash, the question always is it what they did to build the Mikdash, to build the Mishkan, or is it what they did in the Mishkan? Right? So if it's what they did to build the Mishkan, they weren't making flour to build the Mishkan. What they did was, in order to make the curtains, in order to make the curtains and get the colors, you had to grind some of the herbs, some of the
dash.
Right, not dash. The dyes. In order to make the dye, some of them you had to grind. Okay, so that's where you had grinding in the building of the mikdash. In the process of the service in the Mishkan, you grinded the flour for wheat, the siddur of the pas. But that's not the only melacha. The melacha is also about grinding vegetables. That's the building of the Mishkan. Okay, so the Rambam says any vegetable that's subject to cooking, those are the ones that can have tochein, and you can't cut them very, very dak. You can't cut them finely. Okay, what does that mean for cooking? Does that mean that vegetable always has to be cooked? Or does that mean if I'm intending to cook it? Okay, that's the Kesef Mishnah and the Aruch HaShulchan in A and B. What does the Rambam mean by vegetables that are for cooking? Again, are these vegetables that must be cooked, or is it vegetables that I am intending to cook? Okay, the Yereim in number 3 held that tochen can apply to all vegetables down the line. Every vegetable, every fruit can be subject to tochen. That was the Yereim. The Shulchan Aruch, he doesn't say all the vegetables, but he doesn't say for cooking either. The Shulchan Aruch simply says, I think this would be wise to take a look at this Shulchan Aruch inside. So let's take a look at the Shulchan Aruch. Take a look at page 75. Hold your finger on 102 and take a look at page 75. Take a look at the Shulchan Aruch's Lashon. The Shulchan Aruch says, right, what does he say? 75, source 8. 70, if he cuts the vegetable very small, chai mishum tochen. I said yerek.
Yerek usually
vegetable.
The leaves.
Really? Yerek also means vegetable, right? So the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say for cooking. He doesn't use the lashon of the Rambam. So the Mishnah Brura, based on this, wants to say it's going to be hard for me to eat because while I'm talking, I can't eat. But everyone else eat. You can save me for later. For later, I'll take it. But what's it called? Yashikov though. So the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say like the Rambam to cook. So the Mishnah Brura wants to understand that Shulchan Aruch means all vegetables down the line. Okay. The Yalkut Yosef, he wants to say that really the Shulchan Aruch meant like the Rambam, and it's just for cooking, but you should be machmer like the Mishnah Brura, and you should not cut any vegetable finely, any vegetable dak. Okay, so the Yalkut Yosef says that most probably Shulchan Aruch meant like the Rambam. Those that are vegetables are for cooking, but since he doesn't say it, it's good to be machmer, and any vegetable is subject to the problem of tochein on Shabbat. Okay.
You cut potatoes fine in order to cook them.
Right. That's the problem of tochein, like the Rambam. That's what we would want to say, but we say now, since he doesn't use the word lavashlo like the Rambam uses, we say any vegetable for any reason, right? Even a vegetable that you eat without cooking it ever. Okay, yeah. So that would also be a problem. So that's 2 sections reviewed already from last week. Now the next section was, what about cutting it? I think we would call it Julian style. Julienne style. Okay, so if you take a look at page 81, you have the picture over there. So if you ever ate the Bukharian salad, chimche, right? That's the carrot salad that they cut very finely, and then they put some vinegar and salt, whatever else they put in, lemon juice, right? It's a very good, nice salad if you make it right. So it's very thinly sliced. So the question is as follows: is Tochein still an issue if I don't cut it very small on all dimensions, right? Everything has a 3-dimension. You have your length, your width, and your height, right? But if I only cut it on 2 sides small, but I leave 1 side long, is that still considered dak or not?
This is not dak.
So there was it is a machloket. The Orchot Shabbat, he brings down the Gemara, and Rashi says in the Gemara over there, the person who makes a basket out of wood, right? The Gemara said, person makes a basket out of wood, he's chayiv 11 chatats. He did 11 sins. 11 chatats, 11 melachot. So Rashi, in spelling out the melachot, says that one of the melachos that he did was cutting the wood and doing tochein by cutting it small. Now, how do you make a basket? You cut them thin, but you leave them long. You're not making little pegs. So Rashi says that cutting it narrow stripped is also considered dak. Cutting it small on 2 sides, the Orchat Shabbat says, is an issue of tochein. Rav Moshe Feinstein says that may very well be true, but that may very well be true only by wood and not by food. Okay? By food, in order for it to be considered dak, it has to be cut on all the sides. So if you cut it in long strips, so if you cut it 2-dimensional short, but on 1 dimension you're leaving it long, says Rav Moshe, that is not dak. That's not considered small.
Yeah, it's not dak.
Okay. Now we come to the next section on page 103, where in the review of Tochein for immediate use. Okay, so the Rashba comes and he gives a big kula, a big leniency when it comes to Tochein. And the Rashba says, similarly, that we have by Borer, right, when you have to select something on Shabbat. And we said that if you do it miyad, right, you do it for right away, l'alter, for right away, you're allowed to do it as long as you're doing it biyad, and the same thing applies by Tochein. By Tochein, if you're doing it for miyad, you're doing it l'alter, you're doing it for right away, then you're allowed to cut it up dak. And his reasoning is that that's derech achila. That's the way people eat a certain food, right? Some food you eat big pieces, like some people are eating arbus now in big pieces, the watermelon in big pieces, and some people eating it in small pieces, right? Personally, if you ask me, I like a small piece. Most people have somewhat of a beard, a little bit longer, sometimes a longer beard, right? So it gets a little messy, everything gets sticky. So you want it in a smaller piece, so it goes straight into the mouth, it's easier. Okay, so some people eat their watermelon finely diced. Some people eat it a little bit bigger. So says the Rashba, as long as you're doing it right before you're eating it, that's a derech achila, and that would be mutter to do on Shabbat. Okay, so that would mean that comes out that if I want to make an Israeli salad, right, and I want to make it right before the Suda, a person can do it, can chop it up very finely, and it's not a problem. Right? The Beit Yosef, look at source number 2 on page 103, the second paragraph, the second section over there. It's permitted to cut a vegetable salad, but it's proper to cut the pieces. Okay, so the Beit Yosef says one more interesting idea. He says, truth is, like the Rashba, you could do it. Right? The Beit Yosef brings a lot of reasons why you're allowed to do it. He says, first of all, it's like Tosfot, and maybe only beets is the issue, and all the other fruits are okay. It's miyad, okay? And who knows what cutting very small is in the first place. It might have to be very, very small. And today, no one can actually cut that. Many reasons why you would say it doesn't dak, it doesn't exist. But then the Beit Yosef says at the end, it's better than when you're cutting it. If you usually cut Israeli salad and you make your cuts 1 centimeter or whatever it is, you make it 1.5. Right? You go a little bit higher. This way, it showed that it's a little bit bigger than usual. Again, says the Ramah in number 3, You're allowed to chop food very finely if it's going to be eaten miyad, it's eaten right away. The Magen Avraham says there are some poskim that do not want to go with the Rashba, but he says the minhag is everybody does it. That as long as for immediate use, everybody goes with this Rashba, and everybody says that you are allowed to cut very finely, right before, right? So right before eating it. Okay, the Aruch HaShulchan is saying, what's this time considered miyad? What's considered right away? So Allah says the same as borer, right? So we saw the Ashkenazic, poskim, very makel, and they say whatever it takes you, right? Whatever it takes you to prepare for that meal, even everything you have to do takes you an hour and a half, takes you 2 hours. You can do it as long as before. And even if the item requires a longer time to make, you have to let it sit or something like that. You can do that before. The Sfardim, Chamuvadyam, seems to say that miyad really means a half hour to an hour before the Suda. Okay? A half hour to an hour. An hour is already extending it. They really want to say it's a half hour. But they have up to an hour before that we can give, before the Suda, the person could do that. Now, this miyad of an hour before is only if you actually need that hour. Okay? Need that hour means that really the whole time from when you're starting to prepare until the Suda, you're actually preparing the whole time. If you're planning an hour before to start, but then 10 minutes or 20 minutes before the Suda to go sit on the couch and read the Ami magazine, right? Then that's not considered miyad. That's not considered miyad. Okay? And then you will not be able to do that. Okay? That's for bar and for tochen. The same issue. Okay. The Mishnah Berurah says, okay, so you expected them at a certain time. You told them they usually come on time and they came late. That's a different story. You didn't do anything wrong. You did everything right. Okay, now you're done. Okay, but you were done on the time that you said them to be here. Fine, that's fine. Okay. Mishnah Berurah says, truth is, you should try to make the pieces a little bit bigger. Okay, that's what Mishnah Berurah says. And the Shmirat Shabbat Kilchatar, Mordechai Eliyahu said the same thing. You can cut them. You should try to cut them a little bit bigger, and you should cut them miyad. Chamuvadia says, truth is, like the Bet Yosef said, you're allowed to cut them as small as you want, as long as it's miyad, like the Rashba. Cutting it a little bigger pieces, that's already an extra strictness, which is a good thing to do. You get bracha, but it's not meikar hadin. You do not have to cut the pieces a little bigger. Okay, that was Chacham Ovadia in this miyad for Tochein. Okay, the last section that we did last week on the bottom of page 103 was that there is an exception of when Tochein exists. We said Tochein is cutting up something finely. We've been talking about vegetables and stuff that grow from the ground. The Trumat Hadeshen, okay, he wanted to say it only applies, Tochein only applies to things that grow from the ground. If it doesn't grow from the ground, right? For example, stuff that he says shahakol ni'abitbaro on for eggs, chicken, meat, fish, cheese. All these are items that could be cut up very finely, but do not grow from the ground. So says the Trumat Hadeshen on these things, Tochein does not apply. Tochein only applies in stuff that grow from the ground. Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah tell us that you're allowed to cut cooked meat. You're allowed to cut it very finely, right? And you're allowed to cut it even not before the Suda, even way before, because there is no issue of Tochein there at all. Tochein is only on stuff that grow from the ground, okay? But they do make an exception by raw meat. Raw meat, sometimes certain animals eat raw meat, but they won't eat the raw meat if the raw meat is a large, big piece. They'll eat it if you cut it up. So they say over there, since the cutting up makes it edible, it might be an issue of Tochein. Now, could you cut up for animals? It's also true. You can do that if they need their food also. But maybe you're not allowed to, that's only miyad. You would not be able to do that in advance, right? Because then it will be an issue of Tochein. Okay, that's the Mishnah Berurah, also number 3 on page 104. Number 3, chopping raw meat for birds is forbidden because it's only through chopping it that it becomes edible. Again, that's if it's done in advance. chopping it to a degree that they can eat it, taking it from a big piece and making it smaller pieces. It's still considered token to a degree, right? Yaakov Yosef says it's permitted to mash or chop eggs, meat, fish, and cheese, even for use later on Shabbat, because there is no tochein but stuff that don't grow from the ground. So you don't need this miyad. You don't need this miyad leniency. You don't need it. There is no tochein on meat, chicken, and fish. Okay, here is another very important halacha. And number 5, okay? The Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Alter Rebbe, he says, this may not be done with a grater. Meaning, even though you're allowed to cut meat very, very small, you're not allowed to do it with the specific keli for grating, okay? Or even if you're allowed to cut the vegetable, miyad, right away, you cannot grate the vegetable. You're going to have to use a knife. You cannot use a grater, okay? Yeah. Torka, yeah, the grinder, the grater, those you cannot use. It has to be with a knife, okay? Then Chamabadio spoke about if you hold your place and turn back to page 89. Turn back to page 89. You have a couple of pictures. Always nice to have some pictures. On page 89, Chamabadio. So we already saw the metal grater.
The right one is no good.
Right, the grater is not something good. What about the middle one, the egg slicer?
All of them are good.
I've puzzled everything. Okay, that was someone else last week. So Rabbi Haim says the egg slicer is okay. Why would the egg slicer be okay? Okay, but is it a specialized keli? Even if it doesn't grow from the ground, you still can't use a specialized keli. Is that a specialized keli? Chamabaji says it's not a specialized keli because it's just a bunch of knives put together. Okay, it's just a bunch of knives put together that you slice it.
That's the keli.
It's not. No, it's just knives. Okay, it's just knives. Okay, the other one, the left one, left one is a garlic press. That's a specialized keli. That would be a problem. Okay, that would be a problem of Tochein. Okay, that's a specialized keli. Fine. That's the Alka Joseph. Back to page 104. That's number 7. Okay, right. An egg slicer, which is really no more than a row of knife blades. Number 8. Some say it's problematic to use a large, long-bladed kitchen knife. Right. What he wants to say is that there's some knives that are knives and some knives that are knives. Right. What it means is that there's some knives that you use in the food production before it hits the table, and there's some knives that you use at the table. If you're using these specialized knives to cut, maybe Tochein can happen through them because they're a specialized keli. The Aruch HaShulchan is not very convinced of that, and he says a knife's a knife, a knife's a knife, a knife's a knife's a knife, and therefore any knife you use, and he actually uses a knife that's called a hack messer, that apparently is a very, very sharp, long knife, and he said it's still a knife. Therefore, it would be allowed to use that to cut miyad. It's not considered a specialized keli. Okay, Rabotai, that is your review of last week. So now we start our section for this week. And we start on page 92, and we come to the issue of mashing food. Okay? Mashing. So far, we've been talking about cutting something dak, cutting it very finely. What about mashing it? What is mashing? Mashing is making it a puree, right? You have it and you smash it. So there is a Gemara. There's not a Gemara. There's a Tosefta. There's a Tosefta. The Chazon Ish brings this Tosefta, and here's the Tosefta. We see the actual source that says, "Ein meraskin dveila begrogoros." We don't mash fig cake, dried figs, or carobs. Lifnei azikenim, in front of the elders. B'Yom Tov. On Yom Tov, right? You cannot mash them. You cannot make them puree. Avimrasiku biyad shel sakin uve'etza parur ve'enachoshish. Okay, but you're allowed to do it with the shinoi. So let's forget about shinoi for right now. Take a look at the first sentence. The first part said you cannot mash it even in front of the zakenim. Okay, in front of the elders. Right. So the Chazon Ish. Look at the source number 41. The Chazon Ish wants to say as follows. He says that when it comes to mashing, right? V'yesh l'tma. As a man at the time of Tosefta, Emir asking the Vela Gargas or Reuven Lefnei Zekanim, the Lashon Lefnei Zekanim, what does that mean? Mitpare shehem mesuven le'oichel. They're sitting there ready to eat. The elderlies are sitting around ready to eat. And what does the Tosefta say? You can't mash it. Why not? I thought I had this Rashba that said if you're doing it miyad, you can do it. If you're doing it for right away, you can do whatever you want. You can do Tochein. So how come the Tosefta says I can't mash it even if they're sitting in front of me at the table ready to eat? So says the Chazon Ish, v'lechein near it lo hetzer harashba rak pituch dak dak. It's only for cutting that you're allowed to cut miyad if you're going to eat it right away. Even the ikar achituch derech achila, because when you're cutting, that's the way you eat. You eat big, you eat small. Ein chilek ben chetichos ketanos v'gedolos v'akol mikrei derech achila. Although risuk, but when you are mashing, hainu ketisha, this is pounding. Kemaaseh hatchina mamash. It's like actual tochein. What's tochein? You take the wheat and you put it in the pestle and the mortar and you smash it up until you make it into a flour. Well, guess what? Says the Chazon Ish. Mashing is more similar to tochein than cutting is. So since cutting is a little bit different than smashing, like using a pestle and a mortar, right? Using a mill. Therefore, we say if you're doing it miyad, that's okay. But when it comes to mashing it, says the Chazon Ish, and it's not just getting ready to eat. You're changing the food from one stage to another stage, right? Ein achilato miyad po'elet kan plum. Says the Chazon Ish, very machmer over here when it comes to mashing. And the Chazon Ish says you cannot mash on Shabbat even for miyat, even for right away usage.
You can't make a potato salad.
You can't make guacamole. You can't make. You can't smash. Eggs are not subject to tochen. Okay, so we're going to see the Lach L'maisa. We don't hold like the Chazon Ish, but it's just interesting to see how the Chazon Ish holds. Now, the Shmiyat Shabbat Kilchata does go with the Chazon Ish, and he says, pears, chaim, picon, banana, or avocado. You shouldn't smash them. All right, you shouldn't spread them out. Aparsos lechem mishum iser techina, because it is tochein. Okay, so you have here the Chazon Ish. Now, what do? Maisa, we do mash, and we could make guacamole, right? And what's our understanding of this sugya? How do we go around this?
Flour, you take the wheat, you make flour, you make it into much smaller pieces.
Mhm.
I'm making.
Lamden, beautiful. That's the biggest Moshe. That's Rav Moshe. Okay, let's go through Rav Moshe. Let's see how Rav Moshe learns it. That's exactly what Rav Moshe is going to say. What Chamagadi said was that, hold on, what happens when mashing? Mashing, I just mash it and it's still one thing. There's no separate pieces there. When I take the wheat, I'm breaking it up into a million different small pieces, and now they're separated from each other. It's not one big mash, not one big mush, and that's a chiluk. Okay, so let's go through the Igros Moshe, and the Igros Moshe here was that. So the Igros Moshe was asked, is it permissible to squash and mash a banana? So first of all, he says that when it says in the Tosefta, Shelifnei Zekanim, that it's in front of the Zekanim, it doesn't mean that the Zekanim are ready to eat, right? That's the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish saw the Tosefta, and he said, oh, Lifnei Zekanim, that means they're sitting at a table ready to eat. Says Rav Moshe, that's not the way the Ramal learns. No one learns that way, he wants to say. Everyone holds that when the Tosefta says Lifnei Zekanim, that means for the elders at a later time. Doing it for later. Because if it's for miyad, it's going to be okay. Look at the third paragraph in source 43. Hudat yachid. The gam neged the minuk. Ve'ein lesser. Says it's, first of all, the Chazon Ish is one shita. No one else holds like him. That says that mashing is worse than any type of cutting or anything else. Okay, and you can't even do it miyad. and it's negative minute. Everyone does it, and it's not usher. Okay, and that's what he says over here. Now go to 45. Go to source 45. We'll skip the Yechevedat for a moment. Continue in the English Moshe. Now the English Moshe is going to bring this difference in understanding the way Rabbi Agadi brought it over here. So he says over here. The Indian Tchina who Kishinasu Perurin, right? Verisisin, when you grind it, the Tchinas Kemach v'Chedayma. Right? The concept is that you're taking crumbs, you're making a flour, and it's making a lot of different pieces. Okay? Made into crumbs. Right? What happens when you mash a banana is that it becomes very, very soft, fresh and mashed, and it's one piece. It's not different million different pieces. Okay? So therefore, says the Chazon, it says the Ramosha, v'l'chein lo movin mashikosa v'chazonish. I can't understand what the Chazonish is talking about. Chazonish says mashing is the big problem of Tochein because you're actually pounding it like you pound the wheat. It's not compared to the wheat. The wheat gets broken up into a million different pieces, and this banana is staying one piece. Okay? And he writes, and he says, the loidami cloud the gregorous. It's not like dates or figs. Why? Since the dates and the figs, they're dry, they're sticky. And when you break them up, they stay in their own little pieces. They get all stuck to each other, but they're all their own fragments. Okay? So that's a problem. But mashing bananas, right, on top page 95, but mashing bananas is not so. It's impossible then for them to become fragments. There's no small pieces of banana here and small pieces of banana here that are staying next to each other. It's just one big mush. Okay? The banana does not separate into fragments. It remains a single entity as it was from the start. Simply becomes very soft and is very moist as is known. And says Rav Moshe, we checked this ourselves. So Rav Moshe actually sat there with the banana and mashed it. He checked it. Okay? As we smashed dried figs, and we smashed the banana with the grater, and we saw that it is so. So when you smash a banana, it remains one piece. You smash a fig, it remains in pieces. And that is a big difference. Therefore, he sends yesh lahater, bananos for the children. You don't have to just be for the children, but for the children is usually when you would do it. Samach lachilasan, gam b'mazelig, kederch shanoshim, okay, so says Reb Moshe, there is no issue with smashing banana. There is no tochein there because it's not coming into pieces, but rather it's staying one piece. So let's take a look. We skipped source 44 on page 94. We skipped source 44, and that's the Yechavedat. Okay. So a question to Chamavadi was committed to smash a banana or a cooked vegetable with a fork on Shabbat. So says Chamavadi, what does he say? Mutter lechatchila. Rasik banana, you're allowed to use the teeth of the fork, I mean the actual fork itself, and you are allowed to mash the banana or the cooked vegetable. Right. He says l'tzarech tinok, but it doesn't necessarily mean l'tzarech tinok because it's
usually
there's no tachon, but usually that's what you would do. Later on in his ha'ara, he says it's for everyone. It's just that was the question. Right. Not the back of the fork. He's saying the teeth of the fork. Right? Teeth of the fork. Now, we're going to get into Shino in a moment when it comes there, but I just mentioned it right now. The Or L'Tzion wants to say that the teeth of the fork is a Shino, says the Or L'Tzion, right? The Or L'Tzion wants to say the fork, right? The pieces of the fork. The Or L'Tzion says that's a Shino because that's not the way you mash things. Mashing, you use a masher, right? You ever make bojon? You know what bojon is? It was when you take roasted eggplant, right? Before you make baba ganoush, always usually add mayo. So the step before, right? How do you make? You take the roasted eggplant, right? You remember your mother had that special masher, and or maybe your wife's also had it, and then you would mash it. You put the garlic in there, and you remember you were that machine, okay? And you would mash it. That's the keli that you use for mashing. A fork, now, but you want to say like what the Ashkenazic poskim say, is like, what are you talking about? Today we mash with a fork. All week I mash with a fork. Right? So then they would say that's not enough to just use the fork teeth. You would have to use the back of the fork or use the back of a spoon or something like that. But the World of Tzion says that and Chamavaji says the same thing, that the fork itself, it would be considered a shinui enough. We'll get into that into a moment. Right. So if you take a look at page 95, the picture, that's a picture of a masher. Okay. That's going to be a big problem, right? That's the keli. Okay. Okay. Now, give me 1 second over here. I wrote something down. Okay. So, we're going to look at two halachot that are brought in the Yalkut Yosef in the Hebrew edition. I'm taking a look outside the Tzurba for a moment. Okay. Keep a look at time. Okay. I'm opening up here to halacha in Simon 321, which is the Simon of Tochein, and halacha 29. Okay, so let's take a look what he says over here. And he says, banana to use the teeth of the fork, just like you do on a weekday. The same thing you do on a weekday, you can do it on Shabbat also to mash the banana. Al dat la'achilo la'altar, as long as you want to eat it right away. Okay, as long as you're doing it miyad. The ain't tzarich la'asot terisuk b'shinui, and you don't have to do it with the shinui. Okay, so you want to mash the banana, no problem, as long as you're mashing it miyad, you're doing it for use right away, and you can do it with no shinui. Okay, fine. That's when it comes to banana. Now, the next halacha, which I found very interesting, because at first I couldn't understand what's going on here. So maybe someone here will help me to understand this halacha. This is in Yalkut Yosef Simon 321, halacha 19 in the Hebrew edition. In this version, Shabbat, the third piece over here. Okay, he writes as follows: Mashi yesh nohagim ledoch egozim v'tamarim beyacha b'Shabbat. What does that mean? They have some people had what is ledoch, to mash, crush. Okay, egozim, we'll say walnuts, and timarim, dates, and they would smash them together on Shabbat. Okay.
So you know what they do?
Kigush echad. So they become.
So
what does it mean, kigush echad? One substance.
One substance.
Okay. Af im osim ken amanat le'achol la'altar ein lahakel bazet. You can't do it.
But you know why?
Now, why not?
You know why people they're doing this?
So Rabbi Avner is picking on the right point. Is what? You're mashing two together. So what would be the issue of mashing two together? A mashing. If mashing is mutter altar, right? I'm doing it right away. What can I do? So he says a very interesting idea on the bottom, the ha'ara over here. He says that it's going to be an issue of a tolda of ma'amar. Okay? A ma'amar of gathering. Okay? Somehow you're gathering these ma'amar. You're gathering them together, and you're gathering them by mashing them together and putting them together. You're gathering them together, like collecting outside and putting fruits together. And therefore, and when it comes to ma'amer, ein lahater l'tzarech achila l'alter. There is no miyad for ma'amer. So therefore, he says kiloi nimtza imur derech achila. Right? Miyad is for derech achila. This is the way I eat it, so I'm allowed to do it right before I eat it. But ma'amer, right, by gathering, it doesn't apply for derech achila. Therefore, he can't do it. So it's interesting. Here I'm mashing two things together, but mashing two things together is considered gathering, and therefore you can't.
But it's never by dash. Never. Ma'amer, you bring two things together.
So he writes over here.
To make an arema, but dashing you don't.
Because he writes over here. There's a Rambam that says shamikabetz dvela v'asami mena igul. Hareze told us ma'amer.
Okay, mekabet.
Right, mekabet, right?
What is mekabet?
Igul. What does that mean, igul?
What is mekabet?
What does igul mean?
You bring together.
And what is he doing?
The igul.
How did you make the wheel? How do you make the wheel? How do you make the wheel of dates? You smash them together, and you put them together. You put them all finely packed. And says the Rambam that's told of ma'amer. So says Chamavadia, mashing together dates and walnuts. That's ma'amer. You can't do it.
I don't know.
Okay. Again, I found it very interesting, so I brought it out that this is what they say as well. Now, take a moment to stop and talk about guacamole. Okay, so guacamole. How do you make guacamole? Who's my guacamole experts here? Okay, what's guacamole?
You smash it.
Mashing what?
The avocado.
Avocado. Okay, very healthy fruit. Very healthy fruit. Okay. Some people, when they're starting avocado, they think avocado is a vegetable. They make it very one. It's not. It's a H.
But first,
okay.
first you cut it. Before you make the guacamole, you cut the avocado and then you smash it.
Okay, so I'm smashing it. Okay, so it's mashing. Okay, so first of all, the avocado will be just like the banana, and would just be like the squash, right? So when you're squashing it, it still remains one entity. It's not like the timarim or the other stuff that are sticky and stay in separate pieces. They're all one piece. So Rav Ribiat, he wants to say you should use a ripe avocado. They're very soft, so it'll be easier, you know. And it's what's it called? It's already all mashed. It's already ripe, right? You should do it miyad. Okay, you should do it miyad. Like Sochma just say, we're smashing the banana. It has to be miyad. Should be for right away. And he writes over here, you should mash it with a shinui. Okay. We saw Chavaji said that you can use the fork, maybe like the Orletzion that says the fork itself is a shinui already. Okay. What about the issue of lush, right? Of mixing lemon juice into the mix. Okay. So we're going to go into lush next week and what we can do to mix it around. But simply, the way I remember learning it was that reverse the order and crisscross when you're mixing. Okay, so you usually you put it.
The lemon is not for lashing. The lemon is for the time.
I understand, but it's lush can even apply there. So what we would do is put the avocado, then so you put the lemon juice first, throw on the avocado, and then mash it in a crisscross fashion, and this way you definitely have no problems when doing it. Okay. Now they have what?
To make a medicine.
Tochein. Okay.
Not other people. Other things you are not telling me do token.
Okay. So first of all, we saw the Rashba that says it's derech achila, right? You're not eating medicine, so you never have derech achila there. I can eat small. I eat some food big. I eat some food small. I eat some foods solid. I use some foods a little bit softer, mashed up. So it's different when it comes to that. Right, it comes soda, it's pulverized. It's really tochen. It's really grinding. These are not really grinding, but we're saying it's like grinding. So it's different approach. But it's a good question. Okay, that is guacamole. That deals with this issue. Let's move on to our next topic. Our next topic is what's called the unconventional tochen. All right, which is really the issue of the shinui of when it comes to tochen. Okay, the Gemara Masech Shabbos says that if a person has pepper, right, I guess the peppercorn, crushing them one by one with the handle of the knife is permitted. From doing a shinui, it's permitted to crush, okay? And if you do two at a time, that's not allowed. Rava said, who cares? 1, 2. If it's a shinui, I can do as many as I need.
Why
okay,
people,
that could be two at a time.
Why the people yes and other things done no?
What's not?
You say you could smash them, right?
With the handle of a knife.
Yeah, so why?
What can't you smash?
Let's guacamole before we say maybe it's a problem.
No, you could. So you should do a shinoi.
Okay.
Whether the fork is a shinoi or not.
What about the other fruit? Other fruits, if you want to smash.
You could.
You could?
Yeah. As long as they're not like timarim or stuff like that. As long as it's miyad.
Why timarim is asur?
They're saying it's sticky and stuff like that. The tamar itself may be allowed, but to biyacha we saw that not. Let's figure this out right now. Now, the Shibuli Aleket in source 47, he says, I have a question over here. He says, hold on. We learned earlier that if you do a malacha b'shinui, all that you've done is gone from a deraisa to a derabana. It's still usher. Potter Abalasar. Usually, shinoi, right, is still aser derabana. So how come over here you're telling me, oh, you want to mash the fruits, right? Go ahead and use the back of the hand, right, of the knife.
Because this is the Xeran
Right?
Xeran.
So he wants to say as follows.
Xeran Xeran this.
He says they use a knife of a shinoi gomer hilkach mutter lechatchila. He says it's considered a shinoi gomer. Hey, there's a shinoi, there's a change in how you do something, and then there is a change in how you do something, right? There's a small change and there's a huge change. He says using a knife, the back of the handle of the knife to crush something, that's a shinoi gomer. That's not considered a small change. That's considered a big change. And that's why it's not even a derabban. Right? Therefore, it's not even derabban. Says the Beit Yosef, and source 48 on page 97. This is that they allow you to grind the peppers with a knife handle. It's specifically if you're doing it in the ka'ara, but not if you're doing it in the mortar, right? You know, they have the pestle in the mortar, the special bowl, and the thing to crush. You cannot take a knife and do it in that special bowl. It has to be a knife, handle of the knife, and it has to be a regular plate. It has to be 2 shinuis, not one. It has to be a shinui gomer. It has to be really different. Not that I'm using one part and one part not. You use the butt of the knife, but it has to be on a plate and not in the mortar where they usually crush things in. No, you can use the back of the knife, but on a plate, not in a special bowl for crushing. That's what he's saying. Has to be both sides have to be the shinui. Okay, it says Shulchan Aruch in source 49, right? That's like you wrote in the Beit Yosef. That you swash them, you smash them with the handle of a knife, and in a bowl, and not in a mortar, not in a bowl designated for crushing. Okay, now why is that? Why do you need 2 shinuis? So says the Mishnah Berurah. If you use a mortar, what are you doing? You're doing weekday activity. Usually you crush in the mortar. So if you use the mortar here to crush, you're doing weekday activity. So therefore, you have to do 2 changes, and then it becomes mutter to have the tray shinui, because now you have 2 shinuis. The 2 changes in the action, that makes the case permissible. Okay? So now, going back to that Tosefta on page 98, source 51. What did that Tosefta say? Right? Aimer asking to veil the gargaris for Karvin Lifnei Hazakin Biyom Tov. Aval Mirasik hu biyashel sakin uve'etz haparur ve'enu choshesh. You're allowed to do it with the handle of the knife, with the shinoi. Obviously, you're not using the mortar, you're not using that special bowl, and then it becomes permissible. Okay? Now, based on this, he writes, says the Igros Moshe. So back to the Igros Moshe, to that case about the banana, where he said the banana goes one entity. So now he goes back to the Chazon Ish. Says, you, Chazon Ish, said the banana is worse because it's mashing. It's like Tochein, like the real Tochein. But he says, you should know the Chazon Ish also agrees with the shinoi, with the handle of the knife, or the handle of a spoon or a fork. Therefore, practically speaking, if it's possible to mash in a manner that is suitable for babies, even with a handle, it's possible to do so to satisfy the stand of the Chazon Ish as well. Meaning, even the Chazon Ish said, you can't mash the banana because it's pounding. Even he would hold that if you're doing with the shinoi gomer, with 2 shinois, right, with not using the mortar and not using the pestle, you're using something else and something else, then it will be fine, even according to the Chazon Ish. So says the Orchot Shabbat, what about the fork? Says of a risuk banana or avocado, b'shnei amazelik, to use the teeth of the fork, enu nichshav shinoi areze osir. Right? You cannot use the fork. This is going to be David was saying before. You can't use a fork. The fork is what I regularly use. But says the Shalosh Tshuva Or Letzion.
Say yes.
Says the Or Letzion. Nera lenos dati the mirasik peros virakas with the teeth of the fork. The shaperhu shinoi kumuter. This is a good shinoi. Okay, the ain derech the raskin b'mazelik. You don't usually squash with a fork of a bekeli amiyuchad lekach, but you use a special keli to squash. Therefore, the chemish rasik to puchei ha'adama You want to make mashed potatoes, right? Puree your potatoes with a fork. Lasot puree. You want to make it puree. It is a shinoi. So that is the Or L'Tzion, and the Or L'Tzion says your a fork is considered a shinoi enough, and you don't have to use the back of the fork. You don't have to use any of the stuff. So coming outside of the Tzurba, yes.
So what if they do it during the weekday as well, the same way with the fork?
According to the Or L'Tzion, it's still considered a shinoi. It's not what you're doing on the weekday. You're also doing it on a shinoi on a weekday. So he seems to be saying. He seems to be saying that using a fork to mash is not considered the way of mashing, even if you're doing it that way. And that's what it seems from what he's saying. Let's take a look outside of the Tzurba for a moment. We're here in the Yalkut Yosef English edition. Just to review what we're learning. He says, you're permissible to crush peppercorns on Shabbat, but you cannot use a mortar and a pestle, right? Instead, once you crush them with the handle of a knife in a bowl, right? These are two shinois, and therefore it's permissible. Yeah.
I personally, I don't know how to use more impressive to do it, but I use it to grind saffron.
Uh-huh. So what do you use to what? You have saffron as a spice.
The Shabbat, the Shabbat.
Okay. So you have a mortar and a pestle you have like a special. All right. Okay.
But that's no problem.
Just because you put it up, is holding such an item, is that a simple issue? Like that? Put it, but then the way.
You're saying it's being used as a container now.
Yeah.
You leave the spice in there.
You leave the spice in there, you're supposed to pour hot water on it, use cold water, and then that's what gets the color mixing in with water, and then you.
I don't see it as a problem. Ravami, you have any insight on that? Yeah.
I would say pepper grinders also don't. I was also concerned.
Yeah.
Forgetting about the
Pepper grinder is a special case for grinding.
It becomes a bowl, you're saying.
Yeah, that's what he's saying.
But it's miyuchad for it's made for the mortar and pestle. But it's not like it's an expensive thing that you don't touch it out. No, it's $25. But again, if it falls on the ground, it'll break. And also pouring hot water on it, not to digress.
On Shabbat?
Yeah.
On a spice?
On saffron.
Sure.
All spices are kali bishul.
No,
And on the bishul, they're all raw. They're actual bishul.
Let me show you.
Meaning pouring from the daily Sean.
Be a problem, yeah. Yeah.
Like teeth leaking.
It's still kali bishul, even a cliche would be a problem. Right. You would have to use a cliche. Yeah. Okay, fine. That deals with that. Now we come to our last topic for tonight. And this is the topic of Tochein, Acher Tochein. Okay? So it's similar to like Ein Bishul, Acher Bishul. So is there Tochein, is there grinding after grinding? Okay. So we have a Ran in source 55. And the Ran says that it's permitted to crumble flakes of bread for the chickens to place before them immediately. Why? Because there is no tochein after tochein. There is no grinding after grinding. Okay, so since in order to make bread, you already had to grind the wheat, right? So so then you can grind it down again because it's already grinded.
After the grinding of the bread was already done, many other things.
It was already grinded. That's it.
So it's
yeah. So
it's
so
not like a bishul.
Yeah, that's what he's saying.
Because it's continue of one bishul, another bishul. Over here,
take a look at the Ramah. Take a look at the Ramah. Source 56.
I know.
Take a look at the Ramah. The hoil. There is no tochein after tochein. If something was once grinded, you cannot grind it again. It's not considered grinded again. Now, there is a Shulchan Aruch, and the Shulchan Aruch, he brings down two opinions. Okay, he brings down the stam, and then he brings the yesh. Now, let's take a look at these two. What happened over here? This guy's walking outside, and mud comes up on his garment. Okay, so now in the first opinion, he says you can scrub the mud off. Right? You can take it off as long as you're doing it from the inside, not from the outside. It shouldn't look like laundry. Okay, but you're allowed to scrub it off. But then in his yesh mefarshim, that's only true, right? If it's moist, the mud, and you can pull it off. But if it's dry, then you can't. In his yesh, he says that. Why? Because it's tochein. Okay. It's tochein. It's crumbling off now. You're grinding it off.
But this teeth was already
very good.
So now,
What do you mean? You told me mud is all little pieces. It's already grinded up. It's all pieces. Not one big clump over there. Everything is little pieces. Then it dries. So why is it trina achar trina over here?
Teeth. What is the teeth? What is the teeth? It's a powder.
It's small pieces. It's not one piece that became small.
Teeth it's a powder. Was grinded before. So now you put it together with the water and become something, and then you want to clean it.
So now the Chazonish and the Orchat Shabbat is really going to explain the Chazonish. Going to try to understand why we're saying that there's no Tochein Acher Tochein, but then all of a sudden in the Yesh Mefarshim of the Shulchan Aruch, he seems to say there is Tochein after Tochein. So let's take a look at the Chazonish first. Chazonish in source 58 says, this that we said, Tochein does not apply to bread, is that Tochein applies only to separating something which is naturally attached. Meaning, b'derech teva, it becomes attached, right? But separating things which have been attached by people is not included.
It means making a bread.
Tochein. Right.
It means making a bread.
Artificial attachment by a person putting something together, then there's no Tochein there. But in state of nature, it becomes one piece, right? So then there's going to be a Tochein over there. Attach something which had never been ground, but simply have been created separate. Okay, so the Orchat Shabbat now goes into more detail to explain what's going on over here. So he says over here, there is a distinction. Okay. Now, by Bishul, he says, why can't it be Bishul again? Because it was already cooked. So there's no cooking after cooking. However, in the Malacha of Tochein, the second paragraph, the definition is different. It's as follows. Even if the circumstance in which the Malacha of Tochein was never done here, and the substance was crumbled to crumbs from its inception, if it becomes attached by a person's attaching it, we would say in that case that the person's attaching does not constitute attachment. Okay? Meaning that if it's already separate pieces, okay? In nature, it was separate pieces, and now a person comes and puts it together, it's still considered separate pieces. If I understand what the Orchat Shabbat is saying, that's what he's saying. Now, when we say that it's submitted to come of bread, there's no Tochein after Tochein, the root of this allowance is not that the Malach of Tochein was already done to this bread. Rather, the reason is that the attachment done by people are not attachments, right? It was separated, so it's all separate pieces now. And now a human comes and puts it together. Since the flour was already crumbled, and only through human action in which a person kneaded it and baked it did it become attached, such an attachment is not classified as attached regarding the malacha of Tochein, right? It is as though it's still crumbled, and therefore there's no prohibition to crumble it. So
According to the second, when you just said, if I make my own mud, I throw it at something, maybe you'll have to clean it.
If I make my own mud, okay. But in the first paragraph, he was saying that even if nature, it's separate. No, wait, I think the same. He's saying if it's a human action that causes it to come together, whether the human action takes a natural state separation and puts it together, or the human action separated and then the human action goes ahead and puts it back together, it's still a human action of attachment, and that attachment is worthless.
That's what I'm saying. You're giving two different arguments, right? Is it the human action part, in which case if I make the mud and throw it to somebody, they be able to clean it? Or is it you need both? You need that it has to be a natural actually separated itself.
No, he's looking. From my understanding of Shabbat, he's looking at it as the second part. Who made the attachment? If the human made the attachment, it's not considered attached. And if you didn't make your own mud,
If it's in other words, what is vert? Is vert is the have to like masa yidiyadam basically.
right?
If it's natural.
Right, but that's what he was saying in the first part. Since it was a million different pieces, right?
No,
Or
no,
in definition, that's what he's saying. He's saying that he's saying it in both ways. He's saying it in both cases. He's saying that's what he's saying. Says, okay. However, also regarding now he has another piece here. It says regarding the malacha of Tochein, if the newly created attachment does completely remove the previous state. I don't know how it completely removes the previous state, and the entity again is attached like it was when it was first created, then it is subject to Tochein. Okay, here he gives an example. For example, if you take metal, right, and you scraped it into shreds, and then they melt it back again into one piece. He says there it would be subject to Tochein. There it would be subject to Tochein because it went back to its original attachment. This is an absolute attachment, and it's not relevant to judge the lump of metal as crumbled. So he's making these chilukim over here that if it's bread, it seems that it's not attached, and if it's metal, it does seem that it is attached. And look at the Orchat Shabbat. He brings the halacha over here for Ashkenazim. It's submitted to crumbled bread. It's everybody. Cake, a biscuit, and the like to crumbs. There's no concern. Because there's no malacha. There's no malacha of Tochein once there was Tochein. Okay? Of course, you're not allowed to use a special grade or anything like that. Okay. It's submitted to crumb a pill into powder. It's not Tochein. Then he writes, it's forbidden to remove dry mud or cement from clothing because removing them entails grinding the dirt. Okay? Now, the Yalka Joseph, when he brings down the halacha, he brings down the halacha like the stam in the Shulchan Aruch, which is, doesn't make a difference if it's dry or wet. You can always remove it as long as you're removing it from the inside, because there is no tochein achar tochein. This is considered grinded, and therefore it's not an issue afterwards.
What about mechabes?
What do you mean? So laundering, right? That's why you can't do it. You have to do it from bifnim, and not mibechutz. From the inside. Are you allowed to? Are you allowed to take it? Are you allowed to take it inside with two fingers and go like this? That's what I understood it. Here. Let's take a look on in the halacha that he brings down over here. Hold on. Number 23. All right, you're right. If a garment has become soiled with mud, it's permissible on Shabbat to rub off the mud, even though this causes the dry mud to crumble into sand. It's not malach of Tochein. It's permitted to rub the garment onto itself from the inside only, so that the mud will fall off. Okay, from the inside, garment onto itself, you're allowed to do that. It's forbidden to rub the mud from the outside, since this looks like laundering, and that would be right. That would be an issue. Okay, so in the I didn't write down where, but in here he writes. Oh, he writes over here, right? V'lechayra havei kedin stam v'yesh oimrim the halacha kistam shelasvar harishona. There's no difference between the wet and the thing, and the halacha is like the stam, and therefore there is no tochein after tochein when it comes to the mud that is on the clothing. Okay, so this wraps up the malacha of tochein. Today we did a big review of the first section. We finished with the second section. Looking forward, we go into the malacha of lash next week. Bezat Hashem. We started. No, we didn't say you can smash up. No, I did not say. I never said. Where did I read that?
Myself and Dr. were both
Where did I read that?
I heard it say.
Mapito.
Reading
I did not say it. Someone brought up about medicine, saying why grinding medicine is an issue. Oh no, crumbling a pill, the Orchat Shabbat, a pill into powder. It's submitted to crumble a pill into powder. This does not constitute tochein. Now you were saying making medicine. Right. So a lot of the pills.
Yeah, but this not making medicine.
I don't know. Pill, have in your hand. Take it out, smash it up. It's fine with your hand.
No, so it's the Orchat Shabbat. He's right. Right? What's a glula?
Glula, it's like a Tylenol pill.
Just a regular pill, right? Not a capsule, right?
No,
Is it a capsule or it's not a capsule?
No, they're not capsule.
The capsule, you're just opening up the powders in there. He seems to be saying a pill. Because
they call it capsula.
Right, because what is it? In order to make the medicine, they already grinded everything together. So then there's no Tochein after Tochein. Okay, beautiful. We have minyan? We have minyan? Yes, Pika Chibalim Torah Mitzvot. Shneimar. Adonai Chafetz Leman Tzigoi Yidit Torah Miyadir. Amen. Amen.